And
Yeah.
Michelle, before you jump in, just Fernanda, I know you can hear me, you're muted, but this is a little different than the other ones. So if you feel like contributing, feel free, but there's no pressure, okay, kids? So enjoy the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we can also use the chat in the side to kind of, if anybody has questions or things that they want to jot down while Amaya and Abby are working, I've told them that I can navigate that and kind of bring up any questions that anybody has or comments or things that you want them to explore a little bit further. You can just drop them in the chat box and I can find the right time to bring it up so that Abby and Amaya can discuss those things. So thanks for showing up, everybody. I am not going to talk too much because we've got two amazing humans here. But just briefly, myself, Abby and Amaya are from Indianapolis. I was their high school teacher. They are both graduated seniors now, getting ready to go off to school. And both of them, in their own ways, have been working with defending human rights in our community, both in very different ways. Abby is a Speak Truth to Power intern, the very first student intern that we've had in Indianapolis, and she's wrapped up her internship this year. And Abby, make sure that you talk about our Zooming Defender series at the end today. I'll remind you of that. And Amaya has been working as our Black Student Union president, for the past 2 years, 2.5 years, and has been an acting member all 4 years of her high school career. So we've got two really wonderful humans here to kind of talk to us about their journey. And the whole goal of our conversation today, we want to just center it around how young adults can understand their action and how their action is important in creating effective change in their areas of the world, but also sustainable change within their community. So with that being said, I'll let Abby and Amaya introduce themselves and we can get started.
Yeah. Okay. Like she said, I'm Amaya, just graduated from Herron. Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm Abby. I also just graduated from Herron. So I think me and Amaya, we're both going to start by telling our stories of kind of how we got involved in human rights and social justice. So yeah, I'll start and then Amaya will go.
Yeah.
Basically, I've been raised in a really conservative, white, middle-class household, and I know I've grown up really privileged. I grew up seeing injustice a lot around me, but it didn't affect me personally. And as I grew up and exploring my own beliefs and identity, I didn't really understand how anybody could turn a blind eye to the injustices. My beliefs began to clash a lot with my parents and the other adults in my family, as they were all really conservative. And the biggest thing that began to clash was when I began to accept and discover my own sexuality and identity. The experience hurt me a lot, but the unacceptance I faced actually began to fuel my desire to get involved in human rights and advocate for others. I was able to go on a cultural exchange program to Tlaxcala, Mexico, my sophomore year of high school. And it was the first year that the Trump administration was, it was 2016. And so I stayed with a host family for a few weeks, and then my host sister was supposed to come back and stay with me, and they just showed me so much acceptance and hospitality that I hadn't really experienced before. And then as they applied for their visas, they were denied for no reason, and they were robbed of their money that they used to apply for their visas. So when I came back from that trip, I was really angry, and I had seen the injustice and how it affected somebody that I really, really cared about and that had done so much for me. And so, yeah, I came back really angry about the immigration stuff on the US-Mexico border. And I started emailing some representatives, doing things like that. That's kind of how I first started to get involved. And I was also in United States history with Ms. Haddix that year. And we were learning a lot about racism and injustice rooted in American society. So that just made me realize, like, I can't stay silent anymore. And we were able to hear Senator John Lewis speak, which was when I knew that there's no possible way I could ignore these injustices I was seeing just because they didn't affect me personally. I knew that white silence is violence. I realized how important it was to be an ally and speak up against injustice. And I also felt empowered to be an advocate for members in my own community and be there for those who felt unaccepted for their identity and sexuality. Since then, I've been an intern at Kennedy King Memorial Initiative, working to engage the Indianapolis community in human rights work. This fall, I'm going to be studying public policy and global and local social justice, where I hope to continue being an advocate against injustice as a lawyer.
Awesome. Okay. So for me, I obviously am a Black woman and I live in America. So I've always been aware of discrimination, but, and that I was, I guess on the lesser side of that stick, I guess. But I was just kind of existing in it, and I never really understood how deeply rooted like American history was in injustice of all kinds and just discrimination in general. And then I got involved with clubs at my school and I just started learning more. And there were so many avenues for young people to get involved that I had no idea about. I just kind of assumed I'm young, I hear about it, I know it's awful, but that's for adults to handle. That's not my job. That's not anything I'm supposed to be doing. But my freshman year was, like she said, the 2016 election, and that changed a whole lot, especially just on how, like, I viewed the world and how against the ways of our government system I was. And I went to the Women's March that we had here in Indy on the day of the inauguration, and I just saw so many people that were like, there were like 12-year-olds there, like speaking up and saying, like speaking out against injustice and saying how they were working towards ending this cycle of violence and just discrimination in our country. And so it was an amazing thing to see, and it was really inspiring for me. And I realized that there was so much more I could do for not only Black people and the Black community, even though that is such a huge issue and takes centuries of violence to dismantle. There's also so many other communities that I can be an ally to and everything like that. I definitely got more emboldened once I became Black Culture Union president, because I just wanted to do more things at the school, because my school is doing things like, during the month of February, we're gonna like have a little lesson in homeroom that people don't really pay attention to. And that was all that we did. And it wasn't really adding any change. And like I was saying, like Black history didn't really start with Black oppression. So I wanted to change that and start new things. So we made our school's like first ever Black Arts Festival, and it was this really beautiful thing, and it was a free space for Black artists and creators to come together and just share with the community, because no one knew that they existed, because they didn't have the opportunity to, because vendor space is so expensive and things like that. So we wanted to change that, which was highlight my high school career. But when I thought I was done with high school, and we wanted to recognize like Black Culture Union for all the things that they had done, we got these kente cloth stoles that say Black Grads Matter on them. And it was a really good idea. I still think it was a great idea, and I'm still really proud of us and still really excited. But after they were shipped in, after we had taken our graduation photos in them, we received a call from our high school administration that we weren't allowed to wear them, because our school didn't allow like graduation photos that quote made a statement. And that was the thing they kept saying. They kept saying that we weren't allowed to make a statement. And I and all the other members of BCU were like, well, we're not just gonna sit there and take it. We're not gonna retake our graduation photos. We have had enough things taken away from us, especially graduating this year. We didn't get a real graduation. And so we all banded together, and we started just like social media campaigns, and Abby was a part of just like emailing the school, and we got so many people involved that we were granted that opportunity to keep the stoles and wear them in our graduation ceremony or video graduation ceremony. And it was just a really beautiful, empowering thing to see how many people like crowded around us to support us. And I think that's really important because it was all young people. It was teenagers and like freshmen and people in like middle school that were like DMing me saying how they wanted to help. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you don't have to be up on a stage like saying all these things to enact change and to be like anti-discrimination, anti-racist. There are so many things that young people can do. And like the very fact of someone's just saying they recognize that, hey, I'm a person of privilege, or they're calling out other people for discriminatory acts or discriminatory rhetoric, they're like helping to solve the problem. And that's a big part of like human rights activism and human rights like advocacy. It's not always the huge campaigns. I think that's really important to know. But yeah.
So Abby and Amaya, if you want to, now that we know a little bit about your background and your story towards working on injustice in Indianapolis, I'd like for us to for you to just talk a little bit about some steps towards becoming a defender, especially as it pertains to young people, young adults under the age of 18, presumably. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know one thing is, like, especially as a white person with everything that's going on right now, I think it's really important to educate yourself. And it's not like a one-step process. It's just continuously listening to others, educating yourself, like reading books, reading the news, watching documentaries, and just learning about a social issue you are passionate about, and just social issues in general. I think that's a really important step in becoming a defender, is just educating yourself and knowing about a social issue and just keeping up to date on that.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, there's a million social injustices happening. There's a million things to become passionate about, and it's just about discovering that for yourself. Like, I know sophomore year in Ms. Haddix's class, we had that end of the year project, and I did mine on homelessness in Indiana and just Indianapolis, just because it's such a large issue, especially in a bigger city, where they put up a new, like Lucas Oil Stadium, the new football stadium that we had around, I think it was like 2008. They were putting up like homeless spikes and pushing out homeless people because it was just bad for business, and it was just bad optics to show that Indianapolis has a homelessness problem, but they weren't doing anything about it. So it's just about finding things that you care about and like you said, researching them. And it's not just about like you have to keep doing the work, and there's so many avenues for that. Like, if you're seeing now, there's a million petitions to sign. Petitions are free. It takes 30 seconds, and the blank emails that you can send to your representatives. And then there's ways, if you don't have an abundance of money to donate, there's ways you can like stream, or like you listen to this playlist, and the more streams the playlist gets, you are donating more money to a cause and things like that. And just like donating like $5 to a bail fund. There's just there's so many ways to get active. And like you said, Abby and I are both still 17. Like, we're still young people. We're not adults yet, I guess. And we're looking for ways to get active because it's something we're passionate about, in all like avenues that takes.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you think because Amaya, you talked about finding homelessness as something that you wanted to educate yourself on and speak truth on. How do you begin that process of, if you're coming from a background where you're ignorant to these issues in your society, how do you become aware of those things even?
Yeah, I definitely was very ignorant on them. I was one of those people that assumed that like if someone was homeless, it was because of their own issues, and I had no idea about like how it ties into like the VA system and how we're not really helping veterans enough, and how mental health is like a large issue in that, and just income inequalities and how getting on a tangent, but how to get involved, I guess, is just it's really easy. Like, Google's free, and then you just start down that rabbit hole of like looking for more scholastic information about that, and looking for local representatives that can help you out, or that are advocating for the eradication of that issue. And then I had kind of an in, because my dad, at the time that I was doing the presentation, he worked with Marion County. They like their correctional office, he works with mental health with them, because Marion County, the highest like producer of mental health, like not education, but just like helping people with mental health issues, is the jail. And they don't, and so I knew about that because of my dad's work, and how often that people are looked down upon just because of that, and how that leads to homelessness. But just Googling things like that, and looking for, just like I said, representatives for that. And then also just like podcasts you can go to, and like there's so many, the ACLU pages, they'll have a million things like that. And also living in just a place like where all of those things are around you, you can just look for them, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, it's not going up to a homeless person asking, hey, how'd you get here? Like, what'd you do? Why are you homeless? It's looking for those avenues where you can help them, that's other than like putting $1 in a cup, like dismantling that system and how our system got there in the first place. Like, it's about looking at the root of the issue and then working your way up to how to fix the problem that still exists today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. And I also think it's important to recognize, like, it's not, like Amaya said, it's not like a one-step thing. Like, you don't like read a book and then you're done with the issue, like, about it. It's important to recognize that you don't know a lot about like a certain topic, and you want to learn from people, and just continuously educating yourself on that. And then another way I think young defenders can get involved is really just by like committing yourself to defending human rights. And one way to do that is through like writing a personal mission statement. So you can write like a mission statement describing like your goals and like how you want to, just by committing yourself and continuing to get involved. So like I've written one just to like remind myself, like when I'm feeling like there's not anything I can do, just to know that like this is my goal and like I've committed myself to doing this, and that it's not work that you can just like abandon and forget about or ignore. So just reminding yourself that that's something you are passionate about, even if it feels like it's not getting recognized or there's not much progress being made. Just committing yourself to the idea of whatever that is for you, just really like defending those rights like throughout your life, just committing yourself to knowing what you want to do.
And I think like educated allyship is really important too. It's not like, I'm not here to like, with the homelessness issue again, I'm not here to like rescue every homeless person on the street. It's not my job to like, I don't know, like there are also like people who have experienced homelessness directly that are out there advocating from a place of knowledge, from a place of experience, that I should know when to step back and say, hey, this is their turn to talk. I'm going to like help volunteer at like a soup kitchen or something. I'm going to write more legislation about removing just like anti-homeless laws and things like that, because I think that there's like a danger in getting really passionate about something and thinking that like you're the one that, I don't know, that like that you're the only person fighting for it, or that you have to be the loudest person. That's not always the most important part of it. Being the loudest person about it isn't always the most important, which of course there are times, especially when you're the only person speaking up, like in your family. If you're the only person in a group of people that are speaking really like divisive rhetoric or just really ignorant things, then you say, okay, this is my time to be loud and step up about that and speak up about the issues that are wrong and say that, like, hey, this is like, you're incorrect about this. But then recognizing that there are also times to step back, because like there are like just ways, there are different ways to be an advocate, there's different ways to be a defender, there's different ways to be like an ally. And I think just like realizing where you are, or like in what like environment you're in different parts of time, like that's really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like, I think a big part of that is like with white people in particular, like the white savior complex, and like when white people act like they can solve these issues that they're not going through. And it's important to advocate and not be silent about them, but also like learning how to step back and listen and recognize like, I don't know as much about this as like other people do. And then also we wanted to talk about like some different resources that are helpful to get involved in for students, that can just like getting involved in an organization can be really helpful. So we could even like post them in the chat, but
yeah, I can.
Okay, like local chapters of Black Lives Matter. The ACLU local chapters has a page with action steps with different petitions, different representatives to write to. They even have like email templates to write to for different issues, like a really broad range of them. So that's also really helpful. And then just supporting movements that are doing that, like the Bail Project. There's like different chapters of Black Lives Matter, March for Our Lives, that you can get really involved in your community. And I think it's really helpful like for students to start with like something not small, but like in their community. So yeah,
I feel like that it does the most impact, not even just on like making yourself feel good, but like having a change in the community that you grew up in. Like that's a big thing. You don't have to do, like not every human rights like advocacy event you do or action you take has to be a world changing event. It doesn't all have to be what like gets you the Nobel Peace Prize. It's just the little things that can add up, and making a change in your own community, I feel like, is so important, and it doesn't get as much recognition as it should, because that's really big. Just like even in your school or in your family, like your family, if you're just your parents, talking to them about issues that don't affect them and making them aware of all of the injustices that's just not in our just like in our world that people face, and all of the things that frankly are wrong with our system, and just starting there and then working out from there. Like you don't always have to be quote a world changer to be a world changer, you know?
And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about, was like we want young defenders to know that like what Amaya was saying, like it doesn't have to be like some big thing you're starting out with. Even just like the little steps of like speaking out, like with my family, like them being really conservative and having a lot of beliefs that I think are not really, they don't know about and I don't agree with. I'm just speaking out and trying to educate. It's even just little things like that. And then like working up to like, it doesn't have to be like a big Nobel Peace Prize winner to be like a human rights defender. You can really just like do work in your community. And it's just, I feel like it's more about like the attitude of having that in your day-to-day life, like being aware and just speaking out against injustice when you see it.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the most important part to being a young defender is like the commitment to being a young defender, and saying that like every action you do and like you're living to dismantle this idea and dismantle divisive rhetoric, and just say that the things that happen to marginalized groups aren't okay, and I'm going to do whatever I can, no matter what that is, to help. That's like the most important step. It's not everything else that comes with that. It's that personal decision that this isn't right, and I'm going to keep doing what it takes to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
That's so great. I love that. I love ending that with that, Amaya. Thank you. I know some people have messaged me with some questions that they have. So I think we're just going to open up the floor and allow people to ask those questions to you directly if you're ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So questions from anybody?
Yeah, this is Karen. So I have one. I have 2 daughters in your same situation. They've just graduated and hopefully will go to college in the fall. And so my question to you is your advice or your thinking on social media, right? And I'm looking at this from 2 different perspectives. One is how would you advise other young activists to navigate the influx of everything, right? You get a 10-second TikTok that tells you this, you get a YouTube that's like, and so what is that social media literacy? Like, how do you really call through that and not like claim it as the truth? So that's the one, kind of that social media literacy. And then the other piece that I found very interesting, particularly over this last week that I've heard them talk about, is Insta activists. You know, these young and their peers who they're like, Mom, they're not really doing the work. They're just taking a photo someplace and putting it on Instagram, and then they're not writing the letter, or they're not taking that next step. And so we've had some interesting conversations in our family about that. But so kind of the 2 pieces, one, kind of that social media literacy and how do you personally, and your advice for navigating that, and then that activists who are about the social media piece of it. If that makes, so those are kind of one under the big social media umbrella.
Yeah, they're both very like big things, especially just for our generation, and just where we get like most social media, like I'll never say it's bad, all like flat out bad, because there's so much advocacy that goes on, and there's so much quick information that people are getting in real time. Like if you're on Twitter, you're finding out from people who are standing there at the protest, like, hey, I'm about to get tear gassed, like, hey, somebody say something, like this is really important, this is where I am. And so there's that advocacy with it, and there's that importance to it, and why it's necessary, and why it's our new avenue towards like human rights defense. But then, like you said, there is definitely gonna be like an influx of information, and I don't think that I feel like, especially just like for Black people in general, like I know last week I just like, there was a day I was like, I'm just not gonna be on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff, because I don't want to say burnout, because I don't want to ever think that like these issues don't matter, and these issues don't exist, and these issues don't always need to be talked about, because they obviously do. But as a like discriminated against person, as a person in a marginalized group, there's only so much like sight of Black violence someone can take in a day. And I don't think that it's being a bad person to say, hey, I need to step away for just like a day or 2, or just, hey, I need to unplug for a little bit. And then there's also just like knowing like what information is correct. And I do think that that's the important piece of like conscious advocacy, and like not just reading one thing as face value and like taking it and running with it and saying like this is the end all be all. Like seeing something on social media doesn't necessarily mean that it's incorrect, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that it's the entire truth. So if you see something, you can still like do the work to look more into it, and like say like, and just like find out more about the issue instead of just taking it at face value. And then, like, Abby, do you want to talk about the Instagram advocates?
Yeah, so there's a lot of that, especially going on. Like, I think me and Abaya definitely both, like, see that. There's a lot of people, especially, like, right now, who, like, I'll see, like, somebody post, like, white silence is violence, and then, like, a white girl will post Black Lives Matter and expect to be done with the conversation. Or there's Blackout Tuesday, where everyone would post, like, a black screen, and, like, a lot of people just posted that black screen and thought they were done, like they had done their work. And so I think like Amaya said, there's a lot of ways that social media is really helpful for, like, yeah, like Amaya said, like, communicating, like, what's going on, different experiences people have had, like live streaming protests, things like that, especially with, like, not everyone being able to get out because of the pandemic. But then there's also a lot of like the Instagram, like, advocacy, where people think that it's almost like wanting to post something just so that people can see that they care, rather than them actually caring and doing stuff about that in their life. So I think it's important, like, to advocate on social media and like post links to different ways to contact people, but I think it should be more action oriented, or like spreading information instead of just expecting to post something and then people thinking they're done with it.
Yeah, I feel like because people were getting frustrated with people who weren't posting anything, but I know some people who were like, they just don't do the whole social media thing, and they weren't posting anything about it, but they were the ones, like, emailing the representatives and donating and streaming and doing all that stuff. And so I'll say that, like, I feel like social media is the bare minimum, because it takes 30 seconds to put a link in your bio. It takes 2 minutes to, like, write an educated post about what's going on, whether it's from experience or just, like, as an ally, and how to do that accurately. But it's not the only step. Like you said, it's not all you have to do. And sometimes it's not what people are, that's not people's only way, or that's not people's method of, like, human rights advocacy. And I think we have to be okay with that. And also, it's just really frustrating for people who are just doing it for optics. And like, they'll post, like, the black screen, but then still be like, I don't know, all the protesting, that seems a little, I don't know, the police were just doing their job. Like, you can't do those things in the same breath, and you can't have those hypocritical views, but there's always going to be people like that. And I don't think it should discourage other people from doing what they can on social media and beyond that.
One thing that Abby brought up that I just want to reiterate for you is that you talked about, Abby, and I know that Amaya has written one of these or something similar as well in your, Abby, did you call it a contract or a personal mission statement?
Mm-hmm.
Personal defender mission statement. And so if you're trying to be more conscious about the type of activism that you're doing, that personal mission statement, and like you said, Abby, you always go back to that statement. Why am I doing this work? Why is this important to me? How do I get this work done? If you're going back to that mission statement, it could really hold you true to that. But one thing I do want to ask, though, kind of a follow-up to Karen's question about Insta activism. How do you not fall into that trap of Insta activism? For young people that want to get involved but have no idea where to begin, how did you figure out where to begin, and what advice do you have?
I feel like a lot of it's very, like, chain reactionary, because I actually, like, I'm very weird. I didn't have any social media until this year. Like, I wasn't on anything, and then I was like, hey, I'm about to go to college. I probably should. I do want to keep in contact with people, and I do have things that I want to say. And so I follow people that are starting that step and posting links and showing, like, bailout fund situation like that. And I follow, like, the ACLU and things like that. And so it's starting with that groundwork, and then me posting educatedly. Like that's another thing. It's not just willy-nilly thing. It's like strategic activism, and it's still like an important way that information is getting out. And so I think it's just about consciously doing everything that you do and looking for like ideas that you align with. And like people were posting like how to be like an ally, like Miss Haddix was posting like stuff like that, because like the people you follow like need to hear that. And then like I know that I have a lot of Black friends were just saying that they were just getting really stressed out and really anxious about that. And so I know that then that's time to post something about like, hey, like Black people, it's okay to unplug. Here's ways to like focus on your mental health, and it's okay to step back. So I think it's about like conscious posting and knowing your audience and knowing who's going to see what you say, and then just like following accounts and looking for people who are standing up for what you believe in and are the sources of information that you want to hear, or the sources of information that you want to share and spread like the word on.
Your echo chamber. That's what I've learned. Like
Yeah.
your social media echo chamber.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Amaya, especially like following, like it seems like not a lot, but just like for example, for like following Black Lives Matter Indy, or like your local chapter, or different like ACLU pages, they will have like specific action steps, and just like different ways to get involved. So they'll like post their events on there, and that's just going to help you like get involved. I think it's important not to just like look at the step and like repost it maybe on your Instagram story and then like not go to it or not pay any attention to it otherwise, which I think is a problem with like a lot of what's going on. A lot of people are doing that right now. But yeah, just like social media is a really good platform, I feel like, sometimes for like spreading information, spreading events, especially with following like activist accounts.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Does anybody else have questions for Amaya and Abby? Go ahead, Susan.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing yourself and your experience, and I'm just in awe that you've accomplished so much already, and look forward to kind of following you along your defender's journey. Two things, and I kind of they go together. Both of you talked about being able to kind of this awareness and being able to identify these injustices that didn't personally, impact you or affect you, but still you kind of took the step to do something about it, right? And so I want to kind of get like, what made you decide that that was kind of an area of passion for you, right? That even if it didn't impact you, in the context that Amaya said, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that and so how do you kind of almost prioritize in a way, like which injustice you want to kind of focus your time on? And then, because there's so many, and because this work becomes us so much, how do you, and Amaya spoke a little bit about this, but how do you take care of yourself so that you're not like, you don't lose yourself in trying to like address all of it? So
yeah. So like, obviously like the world is a really scary place, and so there are a lot of issues, and I think that your advocacy should definitely come from a place of passion. So like whatever, like there are so many issues and there's so many things that are going on, but whichever one, I guess, just like, this sounds weird, but like just speaks to you the most, or the one. And also sometimes it's the issue that is like come to light right now, because I know there's a lot of people that were advocates for like abolishing ICE and immigration reform and everything like that, but because of what's going on right now in the Black Lives Matter movement, that's where they're shifting their focus, and that's where they're like relying on, because it's about like speaking for like the fire that's burning right now. And of course, like a lot of things are on fire, but like the things that are happening currently, and also just the things that, again, you just care about the most, like the things that you just see, or the things, I don't want to say easiest, but like you have the resources to help with the things that you like. I can't do that much about like marine aquatics or anything like that. I live in the middle of Indiana. So it's just like knowing where you are and what you can help with. And then in terms of like burnout, I guess, like just like know your, I think it's important to like, for that introspection thing, like just take a day and just watch cartoons or something. Like just like recognize when you're getting too involved and this is affecting you personally, because you're still a human being and you're still like a human that has rights, and you still deserve to like treat yourself better, and recognize that like this is a day that I just need to back up a little bit and not engage everything I have, but still have like, that doesn't mean that you just like turn to a racist for the day and like let someone say something that's incorrect. It's just about like the conscious battle that's always going on if you committed to doing that, but then also saying, hey, I won't go to this rally because I'm just going to take a day to sleep in or something like that.
Abby?
I completely agree with Amaya. Like, it's important to like take time for yourself. It can be really hard because like when I get invested in something, I get like really invested in it, and that's all I can think about. So like it can be overwhelming sometimes, but sometimes I feel like that's a good energy to have, just to like know that it matters that much. But being around other people, just like self-care is also really important during that time. And then in terms of like finding your passion, like I know for me, we talked a little bit about this already with the personal mission statements. I think it's really important for everyone to do that because it like helps you. Like mine is not really focused around a specific issue. It's kind of just like my value of human life in general. So like what Amaya said, like right now, the Black Lives Matter movement is what most people are focusing on. And I think that's really important to like stay with what is kind of being focused on, but also just like amplifying other issues as well. Just as you see them come up, like what's going on in the current times. And it doesn't even have to be like one specific issue you're passionate about. It can just be the passion you have for human rights in general. And you'll know, like young defenders, they'll know like what is injustice when they see it. Like it makes you mad, or like a lot of people, everyone reacts to it differently, but just like focusing on those like intuitions you have of this is wrong, this makes me mad, this makes me sad, like just realizing that is important, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you both.
And then Chris has a question, I know.
Yeah, so again, Amaya and Abby, thank you so much for sharing. Knowing that this is kind of being recorded and other people will be looking at it, I know that I think a lot of what my students struggle with is how their belief system might contradict with their parents, and the idea that you know, taking action is not only something that their peers will look at, but that their parents will look at. And so I think Abby, you kind of alluded to that maybe a little bit. And so I was curious, maybe if you could speak to how you kind of addressed that, whether or not your activism was something your parents supported, and if it wasn't, how you addressed that, and then maybe how you addressed it with your peers who might have not agreed with you. I know that in our building, for sure, there's a really wide range of political identities, and not everything that is done with support of other kids. So I was wondering if maybe you might speak to that.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, like most of my family is really, really conservative. Some of them are racist. Some of them are like, all of them are really homophobic. So like growing up in that environment was hard, like with just like processing my own identity, but also just like I basically have the complete opposite beliefs from like all of my family. So it's a lot of like arguing with them, which is hard, but I think it's important for like young defenders to know that you don't have to have the same views as them, and you don't have to be supported by them necessarily in that. Like I know like my parents, they support me. They don't support what I'm standing for or my identity really. But I think it's important to like just know your self-worth in that, that it doesn't matter what they think, because you know this is injustice and you know this is something you need to fight for. And ultimately, like what I've realized is I care more about fighting against this injustice than what my parents will think if I do that, or what my family will think. And another thing is, I think it's also important to realize like a lot of people, like especially like not making excuses for your family, being able to call them out on things, like Amaya touched on that, like being able to like advocate and say like, no, you're wrong in this situation, or trying to educate them. And there's going to be a point where like, depending on families, they might not be willing to like accept that or listen to you. But just knowing that you're not going to make excuses for them. So yeah. And then it's really hard, like having different views, especially being young, from your family, but it's more about like what's important to you. And fighting that injustice is more important to me than what my parents will think if I do that, because I know that's what's right. And just like knowing that it's okay to have different views, like you can still respect them without respecting their ideas.
That's awesome.
Amaya, have you ever experienced something to that level too, in a different way, with friends instead of family, or?
Friends and family too, because I just grew up like with my my parents were still Democrats, but it wasn't in the same level that I wanted to be. It was more of that like learned behavior of like Black people vote Democrat, and it wasn't about like fighting for issues. And I realized that I had a lot more like left wing, like liberal views than my parents. Like my parents were still more fiscally conservative, and then like my dad, oh my gosh, my dad was like a member of the NRA and was like really advocating for like guns and stuff like that, and I was like, no, I don't agree. But as I got older, and I like, it was really important to me because I'm an only child, so I'm gonna be closer to my parents, and so it's really important for me like to like speak up for that. And as I got older and like saying and speaking out no matter what, like I was shifting like even my dad's views about that. My mom takes a little bit more work. She's a little more conservative, but and it's just like active, but it's still like actively trying to do that. And just like with homophobia in general like that, like I'm just not gonna sit. It's just recognizing that you can't sit back and just listen to people say these things. Like it's like Abby said really well, that like you care more about humans' life and more about the fact that these injustices are wrong than if you shouldn't have brought this up at Thanksgiving. Like if, you know, like it's caring more about that. And then just like with friends, just because like people are just ignorant, and understanding that there were a million issues that I was ignorant on and was spreading false ideas about, and saying, and like backtracking, saying, hey, I was wrong, and recognizing that like you don't have to be a product of your environment, and correcting the behaviors that were learned in that environment and still speaking up for other people in that process, and like not caring what other people think, honestly.
Yeah. And like what Amaya said, like you don't have to be a product of your environment. Like if I were to follow exactly what my parents believed, what my family believed, I would not be here. Like I would be, I don't even know. But like you don't have to. That's why like when I hear people say like they were raised that way, like it's not an excuse, because like you develop your own ideas and they can be completely different. They can be the same. But it's about like recognizing that like not a lot of like our beliefs come from what's around us, and how our family is, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like the sole place, especially us as young people, because we are in this age of social media. We have the entire world accessible to us, and the entirety of like all of these belief systems and ways to get active and ways to like stray, I guess, from what we were taught. If we like have that gut feeling that we disagree, we have a lot of avenues and resources to research like why we disagree, or like the root cause of those issues. Like we are the people who have the ability to change that, and like more than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Are there any last questions before we start? Oh, Adnan.
I have a question, and so Amaya, well, first of all, thank you both of you for just your level of vulnerability here. I know that it's not easy to be so open and speak your truth, and I just want to say how much I admire the two of you to come out and speak today.
Thank you.
You brought up one point, Amaya, that resonated with me a lot. You said something along the lines of, you know, it doesn't sit well with me that Black history starts with Black oppression. And we see that a lot in like, I mean, I don't know how much history classes have changed since I was in high school and going through school, but you know, just reading about history of people who are typically marginalized or minorities in this country specifically, you know, it's not a complete history, no matter what group you're talking about, oftentimes. And I'm curious how, for both of you, how has that shaped your worldview, and how have you had to tackle that going through your school process, going through your school career, and how have individual teachers, maybe like Michelle, have helped in tackling some of that, and how have you had conversations with your educators? And so it's a question for both of you to answer, but I would be curious if some of our educators could answer of how you've tackled that when you've seen it as in part of your curriculum, and how you go about speaking up about saying, I don't necessarily agree with having to teach my kids this because they have to be tested on it, but it's not the right material and it's incomplete. And how do you navigate that? So, but we'll start with Abby and Amaya.
Yeah. I feel like our educational system has been like whitewashing and like, I don't want to say dumbing down like just the history of injustice worldwide since like we get to like kindergarten, and then like in 1492 Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, like all that stuff. Like just like we're starting out with like the incorrect history, and we shouldn't have to unlearn what we're taught in school. We shouldn't have to like realize, like it shouldn't be on us to realize that like this is incorrect. And so I think it's really important for teachers like Miss Haddix, where like when we get to her class and we're learning like deeper beyond that, we're learning that like most of the cowboys were Mexican and Black, and like they were only shot as white. Just like I think it's really important. I think Miss Haddix did do a really good job of like unlearning that like rhetoric that we were taught. And it is just super important because like sadly a lot of that work does have to be on us to do that, but it is just like really sad. And I'm glad that there are teachers that are willing to say like, yes, I'm going to teach you because like we are going to be tested on this, like especially in AP classes where like that's the goal, like you're teaching for the test, but also saying like, hey, there's so much more to this, and there's a lot of just like false narratives that we got accustomed to like being fact, and just like consciously like undoing that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Amaya. Like, it sucks because a lot of it is put on us to kind of like unlearn certain things, I feel like. And like I went to a private Christian elementary and middle school. So like I told Miss Haddix this, like she's the first history teacher I have actually learned from about like injustice and about things going on, and like so much of what I learned in her class I did not know before. So I think it's really important to have teachers like you guys who are like really educating students about injustice, but also about things we don't normally learn about in just our regular like American history books. So yeah.
I think something else too, I just want to chime in, and that so much, and I think I've told Amaya and Abby this, I try to tell my students this, but a lot of the good work that these two young women have done in my class is not necessarily my work, but their work in a space that allowed them to do it. So when I like to think about that unlearning, and oh my God, that just made my heart flutter, Amaya, when you said that. I almost started crying. That's the purpose, is to unlearn by, educators can provide resources to young people like Abby and Amaya who clearly pick up on it and can identify the truth within that. And so the work that they've done is not really my doing, more so your job as educators, I believe, in my belief, is to provide that space so that students can then speak truth within your classroom. And they're products of that. I mean, look at them. They, in a matter of an hour, have just talked about the bare minimum of the work that they've been doing their 4 years in high school. So I think that, I'm so glad you asked that, because I really want them to know that the work they've done is not me. They are a product of an educator providing them space to do that.
And I just wanted to piggyback on Michelle that way. I mean, I think that that's the key. And unfortunately, by the time many students get to a place where they can really critically think about big topics just in general, right? Like, they've been so indoctrinated into a certain narrative that they have a hard time questioning, and then that becomes a really difficult thing for them to do. So I think it's less about what we teach and more about the opportunity, as Michelle said, to give space for kids to find their own truth, right? And that's why, I mean, it's just so impressive to listen to Abby and Amaya talk that way, and I mean, that's the goal. And I think, unfortunately, the bigger systematic problem is that these opportunities happen in places with schools that aren't failing. And so failing schools are very heavily regulated by standards, which are heavily narrated by white people in power who decide this is what you're going to teach. It's only the places of affluence that give freedom for intellectual thought because their schools aren't failing and their kids do well on the test on their own. And so I think there's kind of an interesting narrative that exists there, just as an additional aside.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adnan. Are there any final questions for Abby and Amaya before we get to their little closing really fast? I think we're crunching down.
I just want to say, so we're going to let their voice close out the session, but I just want to remind folks that we have summer programming coming up, and Abby and Amaya, if you don't mind, I'd like to send something for your eyes to look at to help kind of frame the youth organizing you're doing, because I think your perspective is needed. But I just want to, again, thank you on behalf of all of us, and take it away.
Yeah, so Abby and Amaya, we talked about closing with, we always want to start out, like, end and think with action. Action oriented is how you all live your life. You two live your life as defenders, young defenders especially. If there is one single step that you would really like to see young people taking today, right now, in this very second, you can kind of close out with what you would like that to be, or you think that should be.
Yeah, I think it's just like reiterating what we said about like the conscious personal decision that like I'm gonna be a human rights like activist, I'm gonna continue this work, and whether you like get off this call and do donate to the bail funds, or you like, hey, I don't follow the ACLU, like I'm gonna follow them. I think it's that important step of like just like recognizing where you're wrong and like fixing those actions and like stepping away from here. I hope like we help people realize that it is like a conscious, like ever going decision. It's not just one thing. It's so much bigger than that. I think that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. And really, like, I hope that people getting off this call can just take like that first action step. Like what Amaya said, like it's a like conscious thinking of like, I'm going to be an activist, I'm going to commit myself to this. So like, even if you get off here and journal a little bit about like your goals, like the mission statement we talked about, or like take that first action step of donating $5 to the bail fund, or following the ACLU on Instagram, or emailing a representative. A lot of this stuff just takes like less than a minute. So I think it's just taking that first step and then just spending some time reflecting and really gathering like what you want to do and who you want to be and what you want to commit yourself to.
Thank you both so much.
Awesome.
All right, that's it. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. Thank you guys.
Round of applause for Abby and Amaya. Yeah.
Thanks, folks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye, Chris. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Michelle.